So every time that I hear that I've heard you speak, and I've heard you speak a few times, I've been to 3% more than once, I think, damn, she can get 20, 50, 100, probably 1,000 people to begin to implement serious change. And obviously, change is why you launched 3%.
Yeah.
So you talked about the shift that led you to that. Was it that sort of file folder staying open in the shift, or was there a particular thing that really just flipped the lever and you were off with 3%?
I feel like this is a moment I get asked about a lot. How did you decide it would be a conference? When did you make the decision? And I've always regretted that I don't have more of a lightning rod moment. But then I actually think that belies how choices like this actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's a slow dawning realization and an itchiness in your soul. And that's very much how it presented for me, where I just became intolerant of these realities and just decided that community was needed and to convene a group to discuss this. It was not, if you had told me back in 2010 when I first announced it, and then the first conference was 2012, if you had told me that it would become this movement and that it would take over my whole life and that like all the things it has done, I would not have believed you, because that wasn't, my intent was to generate meaningful conversation and build community, and that just birthed other gifts.
Yeah. Sometimes timing is everything, Kat. I think you were at a moment where it was really ripe.
Agreed.
Yeah. So obviously Cindy is a very memorable speaker at 3%, but are there other people at 3% across this 8 years that you've been doing it that really sort of sit in your mind as really powerful, memorable people that have spoken?
Yeah, it's funny. I was reflecting on, we've put on, I think, 27 events in the last 7-8 years, and we've certainly had some famous people on our stage, like Tig Notaro and John Gerzema and Jennifer Siegel Newsom. But it's actually the people who maybe aren't household names that shared deeply, deeply personal stories on our stage that stick with me the most. People like Madonna Badger, who spoke about losing her whole family in a fire and how that literally lit a fire in her to challenge the industry around depictions of women and how to live without fear, which almost sounds in contrast to her life experience. You could have heard a pin drop when she spoke at our, and I still see people and they're like, I'll never forget that moment that Madonna Badger gave that keynote. It was so profound. I think about people like Chris Bourguignon, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, who just spoke in Chicago. She's a leader at Cassette in Canada and talked about how she gave up her male privilege in her 40s when she transitioned to become a woman, and how that has both freed her and also, really amplified her contributions creatively, because she's living in authenticity of who she is. I think about stories like that. And then also in Chicago in November, we had 2 17-year-old boys from New York City fly out, and they go to a private Catholic all-boys high school, and they started a feminist club. And hearing these young men speak on stage about their sense of duty as world citizens and their genuine curiosity and desire to serve was unbelievably inspiring. The first question from the audience, this woman stood up and she looked around at everyone else in the audience and she goes, guys, I think we're gonna be okay. If this is the new generation of men that are stepping into leadership, that's pretty exciting. These are the stories that stick with me.
Yeah. Well, I see the next generation in my classrooms all the time, and I have to say that I love my millennial children, but I think Generation Z is really a remarkable and very different generation than I've seen. So I'm pretty excited. So 3% has had sort of a structural evolution. When you started, it was one day. It's no longer one day. You stay in a city for 3 years running now?
We've done that historically, but it's not a formula.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do some streaming now that you didn't in the beginning, and can you just talk about sort of the changes and how you've manifested the knowledge that's in that conference and how you share it?
Yeah, I mean, so much of what we do is in response to what the community tells us they need. And so when I met you at the first 3% conference, it was a one-day conference. And I did an exit survey, and people were like, more time, more people, more everything. And oh, okay. So we became a 2-day conference in year 2. I mean, we immediately doubled in the length of time and created breakouts and themed tracks so that people, because when you have a conference that attracts everyone from like a holding company chairman to a copywriting student, that's a big, differentiation in terms of their needs and what they're on the lookout for. There's a sense of community joining them all, but they have different marching orders. And so we created these theme tracks so that you could self-select what kind of content would be most useful to you. And then the streaming was also in response to a lot of people who couldn't make it to the event, or the event kept selling out earlier and earlier, so people would be shut out. And then people globally, really interesting, they want to see what we're about. And so streaming was a great way to just enable more people to virtually participate.
Okay.